The military dog broke formation and charged past 12 armed soldiers, ignoring every command, and slammed into the quiet nurse standing in the corner of the emergency room. The entire trauma wing went silent. Because K-9 units trained for combat don't abandon their handlers, not unless they recognize someone from the field. And nobody at Riverside General Hospital in Phoenix, Arizona had any idea that the woman they'd been trying to fire for not fitting in had once stitched soldiers back together under mortar fire in places the government still refused to name. Before we go further, if you're watching this, drop a comment with your city. I want to see how far this story travels. Hit that like button and stick with me until the end, because what happens next will leave you speechless. The fluorescent lights in the ER had that sick yellow tint that made everyone look half dead even before they rolled through the doors. Maya Reese stood at the med cart, restocking gauze for the third time that shift, while two residents leaned against the nurse's station, talking loudly enough for the entire floor to hear. "She doesn't even look like she belongs here," the younger one said, flicking his eyes toward Maya. "I mean, what kind of nurse just stands there and doesn't talk to anyone?" "Military dropout, probably," the other one said with a smirk. "Heard she couldn't hack it." Maya kept her face blank and continued counting supplies. She'd learned a long time ago that responding only made it worse. Let them think whatever they wanted. She wasn't here to make friends. She was 32 years old, thin in a way that suggested she forgot to eat more often than she remembered, with dark blonde hair pulled back in a ponytail that never quite stayed neat by the end of a shift. Her scrubs were always clean but worn at the edges. She looked like someone who'd learned to be invisible. Most of the staff at Riverside General treated her like furniture, useful when needed, forgettable the rest of the time. Dr. Colin Pressler, the ER's senior attending, barely acknowledged her existence except to bark orders, the kind of orders that always came with an edge, like he was annoyed she hadn't already read his mind. "Reese, get me an IV kit. Reese, where's the chart? Reese, why are you still standing there?" Never "thank you," never "good work," just Reese, like she didn't have a first name. And then there was Marcus Talbot, the hospital's chief operating officer, a man who wore expensive suits and smiled like he was posing for a campaign ad, even when no one was watching. He'd called Maya into his office 3 days ago and made it very clear that her attitude problem was becoming a liability. "You don't engage with the team," he'd said, leaning back in his leather chair. "You don't participate in staff meetings. Frankly, Maya, people are starting to wonder if you even want to be here." She'd sat across from him with her hands folded in her lap, saying nothing. "I'm putting you on notice," Talbot continued. "One more complaint from a physician, one more incident where you're not a team player, and we're done. Understand?" She understood. She understood that Talbot had never worked a single bedside shift in his life. She understood that he cared more about donor luncheons than patient outcomes. And she understood that arguing would only make things worse, so she'd nodded and walked out. That was 72 hours ago. Tonight, the ER was unusually quiet. A few minor cases, a drunk kid with a split lip, an elderly woman with chest pain who turned out to have heartburn. Nothing that required the kind of focus Maya was used to. She was just finishing a medication restock when the overhead PA crackled to life. "All available personnel to the ambulance bay. Code black. Repeat. Code black." The entire ER shifted. Code black meant mass casualty. It meant something bad enough that the city's emergency system was lighting up. Maya moved toward the bay doors with the rest of the staff, her pulse steady, her hands already running through mental checklists she hadn't touched in years. Outside, the night sky was strobing red and blue. Police cars, fire trucks. And then, rolling in behind them with a low mechanical growl, 3 armored military vehicles that looked like they'd been pulled straight out of a war zone. The ambulance bay went dead silent. Dr. Pressler pushed to the front, his face tight. "What the hell is this?" A uniformed officer stepped out of the lead vehicle, his expression grim. "Military transport. We've got wounded personnel incoming. Critical status. You're the closest trauma center." Before anyone could respond, the rear doors of the transport opened and 2 soldiers jumped out, moving with the kind of precision that only came from combat training. Between them, strapped to a stretcher, was a man in tactical gear soaked in blood. And beside the stretcher, leashed but alert, was a Belgian Malinois with a vest that read K9, Titan. The dog's ears were pinned back, his eyes scanning the crowd of hospital staff with an intensity that made several people step backward. "Get him inside now," one of the soldiers barked. "He's losing blood fast." The trauma team swarmed the stretcher, wheeling it toward the doors, and that's when it happened. Titan's head snapped to the side. He locked onto something in the crowd. And then, without warning, the dog lunged. The handler's leash went taut, and for a second it looked like Titan might drag the man off his feet. But the dog wasn't attacking. He was zeroing in on someone, on Maya. She was standing off to the side, out of the way like always, and suddenly this 80-pound combat dog was pulling toward her with enough force that the handler had to brace his legs. "Titan, heel! Heel!" The dog ignored him. Every person in that ambulance bay turned to stare, because military K-9 units don't do this. They don't break formation. They don't abandon their handlers. They don't lose focus unless something is very wrong or very familiar. Maya stood frozen, her breath caught somewhere in her chest. The dog reached her and immediately sat, pressing his shoulder against her leg, his tail wagging in a way that was unmistakable. Recognition. One of the soldiers, a woman with captain's bars on her collar, stared at Maya with narrowed eyes. "Who the hell are you?" Maya didn't answer. Dr. Pressler stepped forward, irritation flashing across his face. "She's just a nurse. Get that dog under control and let's move." But the captain wasn't looking at Pressler. She was still looking at Maya, and her expression had shifted into something harder, something questioning. Titan only does that for... The captain stopped herself. "What's your name?" "Maya Reese." The captain's eyes widened, just slightly, just enough. "Reese," she repeated slowly. "You prior service?" The entire crowd was listening now. Maya hesitated. She hadn't talked about this in 2 years. Not since she'd left. Not since she'd tried to bury it all under a civilian life that didn't ask questions. "I was," she said quietly. "Long time ago." "What unit?" Maya's jaw tightened. "Does it matter?" "Yeah," the captain said, her voice sharper now. "It really does." Before Maya could respond, another shout came from inside the ER. "He's crashing! Get a crash cart in here now!" The moment shattered. Everyone rushed inside and Maya found herself moving with them, her body shifting into autopilot. Titan stayed glued to her side, his handler struggling to keep up. Inside the trauma bay, chaos had already taken over. The wounded soldier on the table was seizing, his vitals dropping, and Dr. Pressler was shouting orders that nobody could hear over the noise. "Start compressions! Get me an airway kit! Someone find the bleed!" Nurses scrambled. Residents froze. The room was loud and frantic and falling apart. Maya stepped closer to the table, her eyes scanning the patient's body with the kind of speed that didn't come from hospital training. It came from something else. She saw the problem in 3 seconds. "It's not his chest," she said. No one heard her. "It's not his chest," she said again, louder this time. Dr. Pressler shot her a withering look. "Reese, get out of the way. This is above your pay grade." But Maya didn't move. She reached past him, her hands moving faster than anyone expected, and pressed down hard on the soldier's lower abdomen, just below the ribs. The patient gasped. Blood surged into the drainage tube. The monitors beeped back into rhythm. Dr. Pressler stared at her, stunned. "What did you—" "Retroperitoneal bleed," Maya said flatly. "You were looking at the wrong quadrant. He's got a ruptured vessel near the kidney. If you keep doing compressions on his chest, you're going to blow it open." The room went quiet. One of the military medics standing nearby looked at Maya with something close to shock. "How did you see that?" She didn't answer. Dr. Pressler's face flushed red. "You don't just... Who do you think you are?" "Someone who's done this before," Maya said. Her voice was steady, but there was an edge to it now, something that hadn't been there before. The captain from outside pushed into the room, her eyes moving from the stabilizing patient to Maya and back again. "You handled trauma before." It wasn't a question. Maya met her gaze. "Yeah." "Where?" Maya hesitated. The words sat heavy in her throat, words she hadn't spoken out loud in years. "Forward operating bases," she finally said. "Evac units. Places you don't get to know the name of." The room shifted. The residents who'd been mocking her an hour ago suddenly looked like they'd swallowed glass. The captain's expression hardened into something that looked like respect, What was your designation? Maya swallowed. Combat medical specialist, attached to Special Operations Command. No one moved, because that wasn't just prior military. That was the kind of assignment that came with classifications and clearances and the kind of training that most civilian doctors would never touch. Dr. Pressler opened his mouth, then closed it again. The soldier on the table coughed, his breathing evening out, and one of the medics exhaled hard. She just saved his life. Titan, still sitting beside Maya's leg, let out a low, approving huff. The captain stared at Maya for a long moment, then pulled out her phone and stepped into the hallway. Maya could hear her speaking in clipped, urgent tones. She caught fragments. Confirmed. Yes, it's her. No, I'm sure. She's here right now. Dr. Pressler moved closer to Maya, his voice dropping low. You want to explain to me why you never mentioned this? You never asked, Maya said simply. His face reddened. Don't get smart with me, Reese. You work under my authority in this ER, and I don't care what you did before. Dr. Pressler. The new voice came from the doorway. Everyone turned. Standing there, flanked by two armed soldiers, was a man in a dress uniform with more ribbons on his chest than most people saw in a lifetime. His insignia marked him as a lieutenant colonel, and the look on his face suggested he was not here to ask permission. I need to speak with Miss Reese, he said. Now. Marcus Talbot appeared behind him, looking flustered and confused. Excuse me, Colonel, but this is a civilian hospital, and we have protocols. The colonel didn't even glance at him. This is a military matter. Step aside. Talbot's mouth opened and closed like a fish. The colonel walked straight to Maya, and for the first time since she'd arrived at Riverside General, someone looked at her like she mattered. Lieutenant Reese? He said quietly. Maya flinched. I'm not. You were, he interrupted. And frankly, you still are, far as I'm concerned. He glanced at the stabilized patient, then back at her. We need to talk. Outside. Maya followed him into the hallway, her heart pounding in a way it hadn't in years. Behind her, she could hear the trauma bay erupting into whispers. Did he just call her lieutenant? She was an officer? Oh my God, what did we... The colonel led her to an empty conference room and closed the door. Titan followed, his handler finally giving up and just letting the dog stay with her. You disappeared 2 years ago, the colonel said without preamble. Left the service, no forwarding address, no contact. We tried to reach you. I didn't want to be reached, Maya said. Why? She looked away. Because I was done. Done with what? All of it. Her voice cracked just slightly. I spent 6 years patching kids back together in deserts and mountains and places that don't exist on maps. I watched good people die on tables because we didn't have enough supplies or time or luck. I did everything right, and it still wasn't enough. She exhaled hard. So yeah, I was done. The colonel studied her for a long moment. The man you just saved in there? Captain Eric Voss. He's one of the best operators we have. You gave him a chance. Good, Maya said. I hope he makes it. He will. Because of you. The colonel paused. We've been tracking a situation. There's a security concern tied to this hospital. Maya frowned. What kind of concern? The kind that involves supply chain fraud, budget manipulation, and patient care being compromised for profit. He pulled a folder from his jacket and set it on the table. Your COO, Marcus Talbot, has been under investigation for 3 months. We have evidence he's been diverting emergency medical funds and covering it up. Maya's stomach dropped. That's why the equipment's been failing. Exactly. The colonel's expression darkened. And tonight's transport was supposed to go to County General. Someone rerouted it here. We think it was deliberate. A way to expose the gaps. You're saying Talbot set this up? I'm saying someone did. And right now you're the only person in this hospital I trust to tell me the truth. He looked at her steadily. Will you help us? Maya stared at the folder. She'd come here to escape, to disappear, to be no one. But the problem with being no one was that eventually someone noticed. Before she could answer, the door burst open. Marcus Talbot stood there, his face red, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. What is going on here? Reese, you're supposed to be working, not... The colonel stood. Mr. Talbot? I'm going to need you to come with me. Talbot blinked. Excuse me? You're under investigation for federal fraud and criminal negligence. You have the right to remain silent. This is insane! Talbot's voice rose. You can't just waltz in here and... Two federal agents stepped into the room. Talbot's face went white, and Maya, standing in the corner with a combat dog pressed against her leg and a room full of people finally looking at her like she was more than invisible, felt something shift. The quiet was over. The agents moved past Maya like she wasn't even there. Their focus locked entirely on Talbot, whose expression had transformed from indignant fury to something closer to panic. "This is a mistake," he said, his voice climbing an octave. "I don't know what you think you have, but we have financial records," one of the agents said calmly, pulling out handcuffs. "Procurement invoices that don't match hospital inventory, wire transfers to offshore accounts, and testimony from 3 separate vendors who say you solicited kickbacks in exchange for contracts." Talbot's eyes darted to Maya, then back to the agents. "You can't prove any of that." "We already did." The agent clicked the cuffs into place. "Turn around, Mr. Talbot." The sound of metal locking around Talbot's wrists echoed through the small conference room like a gunshot. Maya stood frozen, her mind racing to catch up with what was happening. She'd known something was wrong at Riverside General. Equipment failures that shouldn't have happened, supply shortages that made no sense. But she'd assumed it was just bureaucratic incompetence, the kind of systemic dysfunction that plagued understaffed hospitals everywhere. She hadn't imagined it was deliberate. The colonel watched Talbot being let out, then turned back to Maya. "We'll need a statement from you about the equipment issues you've witnessed, safety violations, anything that might have put patients at risk." "I can do that," Maya said quietly. "Good." He paused, his expression softening just slightly. "And for what it's worth, Lieutenant, it's good to see you again, even under these circumstances." Maya frowned. "Again?" "Kandahar, 2019. You pulled my convoy medic out of a burning vehicle after an IED hit, kept him breathing long enough for the evac." The colonel's jaw tightened. "He made it home because of you, has 2 kids now." The memory surfaced slowly, fragmented and hazy. There had been so many convoys, so much fire and smoke and blood. She remembered hands and pressure points and the desperate rhythm of chest compressions, but the faces had blurred together years ago. "I'm glad he's okay," she said. The colonel nodded once, then left. Maya stood alone in the conference room with Titan still pressed against her leg, the dog's warm weight oddly grounding. She could hear voices in the hallway, sharp and overlapping, the entire ER staff clearly trying to process what had just happened. She didn't want to go back out there. But the soldier in the trauma bay was still her patient, and walking away wasn't an option. When she finally stepped into the hallway, every conversation stopped. Nurses stared. Residents whispered. A janitor pushing a mop cart actually backed up like he was afraid to get too close. Dr. Pressler stood near the nurses' station, his arms crossed, his expression unreadable. He watched Maya approach, and for a long moment, neither of them spoke. "You should have told me," he finally said. "Would it have mattered?" Maya asked. His mouth tightened. "Yeah, it would have." She didn't believe him, but she didn't argue. There wasn't any point. "How's Captain Voss?" she asked instead. "Stable. For now." Pressler exhaled hard, some of the tension leaving his shoulders. "You were right about the bleed. If we'd kept going the way we were, he'd be dead." Maya nodded. "Good. That's it? Just good? What do you want me to say?" Pressler looked at her like he was seeing her for the first time. "I don't know. Maybe I expected you to rub it in. Tell me I was wrong." "You were wrong," Maya said simply. "But I don't care about that. I care about whether the patient lives." Something flickered across Pressler's face. Respect, maybe, or discomfort at being called out so bluntly. He turned and walked back toward the trauma bay without another word. Maya returned to the med cart and went back to restocking supplies, her hands moving on autopilot while her brain tried to catch up with everything that had just imploded around her. Titan settled at her feet, his head resting on his paws, his eyes tracking every person who walked past. One of the younger nurses, a woman named Alicia, who'd always been polite but distant, approached cautiously. "Is it true?" she asked. "You were really in the military?" "Yeah," Maya said. "Like actual combat?" "Yeah." Alicia hesitated, then asked, "Why didn't you ever say anything?" Maya didn't look up from the gauze she was counting. "Because it doesn't matter. I'm here to do a job, same as everyone else." "But it does matter," Alicia said quietly. "People treated you like—" She stopped herself, clearly uncomfortable. "Like I didn't know what I was doing?" Maya finished. "I noticed." Alicia flushed. "I'm sorry." "Don't be." Maya finally met her eyes. "You weren't one of the ones making it worse." The shift dragged on, each hour stretching longer than the last. Word spread fast through the hospital. Talbot arrested, the quiet nurse turning out to be some kind of covert military operative, the federal investigation that was apparently just getting started. By the time Maya's shift ended at 6 in the morning, half the staff looked at her like she was a stranger, and the other half looked at her like she'd personally betrayed them by not announcing her background the second she walked through the door. She changed out of her scrubs in the locker room, exhausted and ready to go home, when her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She almost ignored it, but something made her answer. "Reese," she said. "Lieutenant Reese, this is Captain Daniels. We met in the ambulance bay." Maya straightened. "I remember. I need you to come back to the hospital. There's a situation." "What kind of situation?" "The kind I can't discuss over the phone." Daniels' voice was clipped, urgent. "How fast can you get here?" Maya glanced at the clock. She'd been about to leave. Her apartment was 20 minutes away, and she had 8 hours before her next shift. "I'm still here," she said. "Good. Meet me in the ICU, 3rd floor." The line went dead. Maya stared at her phone for a second, then shoved it into her pocket and headed for the elevator. The ICU was quieter than the ER, the lights dimmer, the air heavy with the mechanical rhythm of ventilators and monitors. Captain Daniels was standing outside one of the rooms, her uniform crisp despite the early hour, her expression grim. "What's going on?" Maya asked. Daniels gestured toward the room. "Captain Voss is awake, and he's asking for you." Maya blinked. "Why?" "I don't know, but he's insistent." Daniels lowered her voice. "He also said something that doesn't make sense. He keeps saying Sierra 7. Does that mean anything to you?" Maya's blood went cold. Sierra 7 wasn't a name. It was a call sign, one she hadn't heard in over 3 years. "Yeah," she said quietly. "It means something." She pushed open the door to Voss's room and stepped inside. He looked worse than she expected, pale, hooked up to half a dozen machines, a breathing tube taped across his face. But his eyes were open, alert, and they locked onto her the second she entered. He tried to speak, but the tube made it impossible. His hand moved weakly, gesturing toward the notepad on the bedside table. Maya picked it up and handed it to him along with a pen. Voss scrawled something quickly, his handwriting shaky but legible. "You were at Kareem Ridge." Maya's chest tightened. Kareem Ridge, the op that had ended her career, the one she didn't talk about, ever. "Yeah," she said. "I was." Voss wrote again, faster this time. "You saved my team. 8 of us made it out because of you." Maya shook her head. "I did my job, that's all." Voss's hand gripped the pen harder, his knuckles white. "No. You held the line when everyone else pulled back. You stayed." She didn't know what to say to that. The memories of Kareem Ridge were fragmented, buried under years of trying to forget. She remembered the sound of gunfire, the weight of someone's blood soaking through her gloves, the way the sky had looked when the helicopter finally came, dark and full of smoke, and impossibly far away. "I'm glad you made it," she said finally. Voss stared at her for a long moment, then wrote one more line. "Why are you here? You should be running a unit, not working night shifts in some nowhere hospital." Maya's throat tightened. "Because I wanted to disappear." Voss's expression softened, and he tapped the notepad gently, underlining the last sentence he'd written. "You can't disappear, not when you're that good." Before Maya could respond, the door opened and Daniel stepped inside. "We have a problem." Maya turned. "What now?" "Dr. Pressler just filed a formal complaint with the hospital board. He's claiming you overstepped your authority in the trauma bay and that your actions could have compromised patient care." Maya stared at her. "Are you serious?" "Dead serious." Daniels' jaw tightened. "He's trying to get you suspended pending an investigation." Voss's hand shot up, scribbling furiously on the notepad. Bullshit. She saved my life. I know that, Daniels said. But Pressler's arguing that a nurse shouldn't have intervened without direct physician oversight. He's making it a chain of command issue. Maya felt something snap inside her, a thin wire of patience that had been fraying for 2 years finally giving out. Where is he? Maya, where is he? Daniels hesitated, then sighed. Conference room B. He's meeting with the board right now. Maya was out the door before Daniels could stop her. She took the stairs instead of the elevator, her legs burning by the time she hit the second floor. Titan followed, his nails clicking against the linoleum, and when she pushed open the door to the administrative wing, she could hear voices coming from the conference room at the end of the hall. She didn't knock. The door slammed open, and every head in the room turned toward her. Dr. Pressler sat at the head of the table, flanked by 3 board members in business suits who looked like they'd been dragged out of bed. His expression shifted from surprise to irritation in half a second. Reese, this is a closed meeting. You filed a complaint about me, Maya said. Yes, and we'll address it through proper channels. No. Her voice was flat, cold, the kind of tone that came from somewhere she'd thought she'd left behind. We're addressing it now. One of the board members, a gray-haired woman with sharp eyes, leaned forward. Ms. Reese, I understand you're upset, but this isn't— I'm not upset, Maya interrupted. I'm done. Pressler's face reddened. If you can't handle criticism— Criticism? Maya stepped closer to the table, and Titan moved with her, the dog's presence making everyone shift uncomfortably in their seats. You want to talk about chain of command? Fine. I followed protocol. I identified a life-threatening injury that you missed. I stabilized the patient. And instead of admitting that you were wrong, you're trying to bury me under paperwork so you don't have to face the fact that a nurse saw something you didn't. That's not— Yes, it is. Her voice didn't rise, but the air in the room changed. You've been treating me like I'm incompetent since the day I started here. You've ignored me, talked over me, and made sure everyone on your staff knew I wasn't worth listening to. And the second I prove otherwise, you file a complaint. The gray-haired board member glanced at Pressler, then back at Maya. Do you have documentation of these claims? I have 2 years of incident reports that were ignored, Maya said. I have equipment failure logs that no one followed up on, and I have a federal investigation that just arrested your COO for fraud and negligence. She looked directly at Pressler. So yeah, I think I have documentation. The room went silent. Pressler's face had gone from red to white. You can't— I can. Maya's hands were steady, her voice calm. And I will. Because I spent 6 years keeping soldiers alive in places where people like you wouldn't last 10 minutes. I don't need your approval. I don't need your validation. I just need you to stop getting in the way of me doing my job. The gray-haired woman exchanged a glance with the other board members, then cleared her throat. Dr. Pressler, I think we need to table this discussion until we've reviewed the full context of last night's events. Pressler opened his mouth to argue, then seemed to think better of it. His jaw tightened, but he nodded stiffly. Maya turned and walked out without waiting for a response. Her hands were shaking by the time she reached the stairwell, adrenaline flooding her system in a way it hadn't in years. She leaned against the wall, breathing hard, and Titan pressed against her leg again, his weight steadying her. That was stupid, she muttered to the dog. That was so stupid. Titan huffed, unbothered. She heard footsteps behind her and turned to find Daniels standing in the hallway, arms crossed, an expression on her face that might have been amusement. Feel better? Daniels asked. Not really, Maya admitted. Good. Because we're not done yet. Maya frowned. What are you talking about? Daniels pulled out her phone and showed Maya a message. We just got word from federal investigators. Talbot wasn't working alone. There's at least one other person inside this hospital who was helping him cover up the supply fraud. Maya's stomach sank. Who? We don't know yet. But whoever it is, they have access to patient records, financial systems, and administrative controls. Daniel's expression darkened. And they just locked down the hospital's internal network. No one can access patient files, no medication records, no surgical schedules. Why would they? Because they're destroying evidence, Daniels said, and we have about 2 hours to stop them before everything disappears. Maya stared at her. You want me to help with this? You're the only person in this building I trust right now. Daniels met her eyes. So yeah, I want your help. Maya thought about walking away, about going home, crawling into bed, and pretending none of this had anything to do with her. But the problem with being good at something was that people noticed, and once they noticed, walking away stopped being an option. What do you need me to do? She asked. Daniels smiled grimly. First, we need to find out who has administrative access to the hospital's network. Then we need to figure out where they are before they finish covering their tracks. They spent the next hour combing through personnel files in a locked office on the 4th floor, Daniels pulling strings with hospital security while Maya cross-referenced access logs with shift schedules. It was tedious, exhausting work, and Maya's brain felt like it was moving through mud. But slowly, a pattern started to emerge. There, Maya said, pointing at the screen. Dr. Lawrence Kirby, head of hospital operations. He's logged into the financial system 17 times in the last 2 weeks, always between midnight and 3 a.m. Daniels leaned closer. That's not normal? Not for an operations director. He should be delegating that kind of access, not doing it himself. Maya pulled up another file. And look at this. Every time he logs in, there's a corresponding deletion in the procurement database. Daniels swore under her breath. He's erasing the paper trail. Not just erasing, replacing. Maya clicked through several more screens. He's backdating invoices, creating fake vendor records, making it look like the equipment purchases went through when they didn't. Can you prove it? Maya hesitated. If I can get into his office and access his workstation, yeah, but he's going to notice if we try to lock him out. Then we don't lock him out, Daniels said. We catch him in the act. They found Kirby 40 minutes later, sitting in his office on the 5th floor with his door closed and his desktop screen glowing in the dark. Daniels knocked once, then pushed the door open without waiting for a response. Kirby looked up, startled, his hand already moving toward the mouse. Captain, this is a private... Step away from the computer, Dr. Kirby. His expression shifted, confusion giving way to something sharper. I don't know what you think you're doing, but... We know about the fraud, Daniels said flatly. We know you've been helping Talbot, and we know you're trying to destroy evidence right now. Kirby's face went pale, then flushed red. That's absurd. I'm the head of operations. I have every right to access these systems. Not at 2 a.m, Maya said from the doorway, and not to delete financial records. Kirby's eyes flicked to her, and something cold settled into his expression. You're the nurse everyone's been talking about. Yeah, Maya said. You should have stayed quiet. His hand moved faster than either of them expected, slamming down on the keyboard. The screen went black. No! Daniels lunged forward, but it was too late. Kirby had triggered something, a script, a program, something that was now wiping the server in real time. Kirby stood, backing toward the window. You can't prove anything now. Maya moved without thinking, her training overriding every civilian instinct she'd tried to build over the past 2 years. She crossed the room in 3 steps, grabbed Kirby's wrist, and twisted it behind his back before he could react. He yelped, stumbling forward, and Daniels was there with zip-tie restraints before he could recover. You can't do this, Kirby gasped. I have rights. So did the patients who died because you and Talbot cut corners, Maya said quietly. Daniels pulled out her phone, already calling for backup, and Maya stood there, breathing hard, staring at the blank computer screen, and realized that the quiet life she'd been trying to build had just shattered completely. The door burst open, and 2 federal agents rushed in, followed closely by hospital security. But before anyone could say anything, the overhead PA system crackled to life. Code Blue, ICU. Code Blue, ICU. All available personnel respond immediately. Maya's blood turned to ice. Captain Voss. She was running before anyone could stop her. The stairwell was faster than waiting for an elevator, and Maya hit the 3rd floor landing at a full sprint, her shoulder slamming into the door hard enough to bruise. The ICU hallway stretched ahead of her, fluorescent lights flickering overhead, and she could already hear the chaos spilling out of Voss's room, alarms screaming, voices shouting, the telltale sound of a crash cart being wheeled at speed. She burst through the doorway and immediately assessed the scene with the kind of cold clarity that only came from muscle memory older than conscious thought. Voss was seizing, his body rigid against the bed, the monitors above him a mess of jagged lines and shrieking alerts. Two nurses were trying to hold him down while a resident fumbled with a syringe, his hands shaking so badly he nearly dropped it. "Give me that," Maya snapped, crossing the room in 2 strides. The resident looked up, startled. "I've got it. You're about to stick him in the wrong vein. Move." He hesitated for half a second, then stepped aside. Maya took the syringe, found the IV port, and pushed the sedative in one smooth motion. 5 seconds. The seizing slowed, then stopped, Voss's body going slack against the restraints. The alarms kept screaming. "His pressure's dropping," one of the nurses said, her voice tight. Maya glanced at the monitor. 80 over 50 and falling. Not good. "Get me a pressure bag and start another line," she said, "and someone find out why his airway's compromised." The resident moved to the ventilator, checking the settings, his face going pale. "The tube's dislodged. He's not getting enough oxygen." "Then fix it." I need an attending." "You need to do your job," Maya said, her voice sharp enough to cut. "Right now." He swallowed hard, then moved, his hand steadier now that someone was giving him direction. Maya stepped back, letting the team work, her own pulse hammering in her ears. Voss's vitals were stabilizing, but barely. Whatever had triggered the seizure had hit him hard, and if they'd been 30 seconds slower... She didn't finish the thought. Dr. Pressler appeared in the doorway, his face flushed, his eyes immediately locking onto Maya. "What the hell are you doing in here?" "Saving his life," Maya said flatly. "Again." "You're not authorized." "I don't care." She turned to face him fully, and something in her expression made him stop mid-sentence. "You want to write me up? Fine. Do it after he's stable." Pressler's jaw tightened, but he didn't push it. Instead, he moved to the monitors scanning the readings, his mouth pressed into a thin line. "What happened?" "Seizure," the resident said. "Came out of nowhere. We sedated him and resecured the airway." "Blood work?" "Running it now." Pressler looked at Maya, and for the first time since she'd met him, there was something in his eyes that wasn't contempt. It was closer to exhaustion. "You think this was natural?" Maya's stomach dropped. "No. Neither do I." Captain Daniels pushed into the room, still on her phone, her expression grim. "We've got a problem." Kirby had remote access to the hospital's medication dispensary system. He could have tampered with any patient's IV drugs. The room went dead silent. "You're saying he poisoned him?" one of the nurses whispered. "I'm saying it's possible," Daniels said. She looked at Maya. "How fast can you get a tox screen?" "Lab's backed up," Pressler said before Maya could answer. "It'll take at least 2 hours." "We don't have 2 hours." Maya was already moving toward the IV stand, her eyes scanning the bags hanging above Voss's bed. "If Kirby dosed him with something, it's still in his system. We need to flush it out now." "You can't just..." Pressler started. "Watch me." She disconnected the secondary line, isolated the primary fluids, and started a rapid saline flush while mentally running through every possible toxin that could cause a seizure in a trauma patient. The list was long. Too long. "Maya." Daniels's voice was low, urgent. "If you're wrong about this..." "I'm not." She didn't look up. Kirby knew we were onto him. He knew Voss could testify about what happened during the transport. This was his way of cleaning up loose ends. Pressler exhaled hard. Jesus. The monitors started to stabilize, Voss's heart rate evening out, his oxygen levels climbing back toward normal. It wasn't proof, but it was enough to suggest Maya had been right. Daniel stepped into the hallway, her phone already back at her ear, her voice clipped and angry. Maya could hear fragments: federal custody, attempted murder, locked down the entire floor. The resident looked at Maya, his face pale. "How did you know?" "Because I've seen it before," Maya said quietly. "Different war, same tactics." She stayed with Voss for another 20 minutes, monitoring his vitals, making sure the flush was working, ignoring the way the rest of the staff kept glancing at her like she was something dangerous they hadn't expected to find in a civilian hospital. When Voss's blood pressure finally stabilized and his breathing evened out, Maya stepped back and let the ICU team take over. She was halfway to the door when Pressler spoke behind her. "Reese?" She turned. He looked older than he had that morning, the lines around his eyes deeper. his shoulders sagging under the weight of something he clearly hadn't expected to carry. You were right about all of it. Maya didn't respond. I should have listened, he continued. I should have. He stopped, shaking his head. I don't know what I should have done, but it wasn't this. No, Maya said. It wasn't. She left before he could say anything else. Titan was waiting in the hallway, the dog's handler finally giving up and just letting him follow Maya wherever she went. The K9 fell into step beside her, his ears alert, his eyes tracking every person they passed. Daniels caught up with them near the elevator. Kirby's in federal custody. They're processing him now. Good, Maya said. We're also pulling every patient file he had access to. If he tampered with anyone else, he didn't. Daniels frowned. How do you know? Because Voss was the only one who could connect him to the fraud investigation. Everyone else was just collateral. Maya pressed the button for the ground floor. He's not a killer, he's a coward who panicked. The elevator doors opened and they stepped inside. You sound pretty sure about that, Daniels said. I am. Maya leaned against the back wall, suddenly aware of how exhausted she was. She hadn't slept in over 24 hours and her body was starting to feel it, the kind of bone-deep fatigue that made every movement feel like dragging weight through mud. The elevator descended in silence. When the doors opened on the ground floor, Maya was surprised to find the main lobby packed with people. Hospital staff, military personnel, federal agents, and what looked like half the local news stations camped outside the front entrance with cameras and microphones. What the hell? Maya muttered. Daniels grimaced. Word got out. Talbot's arrest, the fraud investigation, the attempted murder. It's all over the news. Great. Yeah. Daniels hesitated. You should probably know your name came up. They're calling you a hero. Maya's stomach twisted. I'm not a hero. Tell that to them. She followed Daniel's gaze toward the front windows, where several reporters were pointing cameras directly at the lobby. One of them spotted Maya and immediately started gesturing to his crew. I need to get out of here, Maya said. Good luck with that. Daniels nodded toward the crowd. The colonel wants to make a statement. He's asking for you to be there. No. Maya, I said no. Her voice came out harder than she intended. I didn't do this for recognition. I did it because it needed to be done. That's it. Daniel studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Okay. I'll tell him. Maya turned and headed for the side exit, Titan still glued to her side, but she'd barely made it 10 feet before someone called her name. Lieutenant Reese! She stopped, her entire body going tense. The voice belonged to a man in a dark suit with a military bearing that was impossible to miss even in civilian clothes. He was older, maybe late 50s, with gray hair and the kind of posture that came from decades of service. Maya recognized him immediately. Colonel James Harmon, her former commanding officer. The man who'd signed her discharge papers 3 years ago and told her she was making a mistake. Sir, she said quietly. Harmon stopped a few feet away, his expression unreadable. Didn't expect to find you here? I work here. So I heard. He glanced around the lobby, taking in the chaos, the cameras, the federal agents still processing staff members. Hell of a mess. Yeah. You always did have a talent for finding those. Maya's jaw tightened. Was there something you needed, sir? Harmon's expression softened, just slightly. I wanted to see if you were okay. I'm fine. You don't look fine. With respect, sir, I don't care how I look. He smiled faintly. Still stubborn. Still breathing. Harmon's smile faded. I read the report from Kareem Ridge. What you did there, I don't want to talk about it. I know. He paused, choosing his words carefully. But you should know that the team you saved, they've been asking about you, wanting to find you. Thank you. Maya looked away. They don't owe me anything. Maybe not, but they'd like the chance to say it anyway. Harmon reached into his jacket and pulled out a folder. There's something else. We've been tracking a situation for the last 6 months. Medical supply fraud, equipment diversions, pharmaceutical theft, all targeting military hospitals and civilian trauma centers that handle veteran care. Maya's chest tightened. How big? Big enough that the DoD formed a task force. We've identified at least 15 facilities across 7 states. Harmon opened the folder, showing her a list of hospital names. Riverside General was third from the top. Talbot and Kirby weren't working alone. They were part of a network. Jesus. We need someone who understands both sides, Harmon said. Military protocols and civilian hospital operations. Someone who can identify the gaps and figure out how they're exploiting them. He looked at her directly. We need you. Maya shook her head. I'm not. You're exactly who we need. His voice was firm. I know you left because you were burned out. I know you wanted to disappear, but people are dying, Maya. Soldiers who survived combat are coming home and getting substandard care because someone's stealing from them. I can't. Yes, you can. Harmon's expression hardened, and you know it. Before Maya could respond, the front doors burst open, and a new wave of federal agents swept into the lobby, this time led by a woman in a sharp suit with a badge clipped to her belt. She made a beeline for Daniels, spoke quickly and quietly, then turned and scanned the crowd. Her eyes landed on Maya. Miss Reese? Maya's instinct screamed at her to run, but she stayed put. Yeah. The agent crossed the lobby, her expression neutral but her body language radiating authority. Special Agent Lisa Ramirez, FBI. I need to ask you some questions about the events of the last 12 hours. Okay, Maya said carefully. Not here. Somewhere private. Ramirez glanced at Harmon, then back at Maya. This won't take long. Maya followed her to a small conference room off the main hallway, Titan still refusing to leave her side. Ramirez didn't seem bothered by the dog's presence. She closed the door, gestured for Maya to sit, and pulled out a digital recorder. Do you know why we're here? Ramirez asked. I assume it's about Talbot and Kirby. Partially. Ramirez set the recorder on the table. But we're also investigating a broader network. We believe the fraud at Riverside General is connected to similar operations at 3 other hospitals in the region. Maya's blood went cold. How many people are we talking about? At least a dozen, maybe more. Ramirez leaned forward. And we think someone inside the military supply chain has been facilitating it. Military? Yeah, medical equipment, pharmaceuticals, emergency response systems, all being diverted or sold off before they reach their intended destinations. Ramirez's expression darkened. We've been tracking this for months, but we didn't have proof until tonight. What does this have to do with me? Captain Voss wasn't transported here by accident. His unit was investigating the same supply chain issues we've been tracking. Someone wanted him silenced before he could testify. Ramirez paused. You saved his life. Twice. Which means whoever's behind this is going to see you as a problem. Maya's hands tightened on the armrests of her chair. Are you saying I'm in danger? I'm saying you need to be careful. Ramirez pulled a card from her pocket and slid it across the table. If you notice anything unusual, anyone following you, strange calls, anything, you contact me immediately. Maya took the card, her mind racing. One more thing, Ramirez said. We're going to need your testimony about the equipment failures, the budget cuts, everything you witnessed while working here. I already gave a statement to Captain Daniels. I know, but this is federal now. It's going to get bigger before it gets smaller. Ramirez leaned back. We've also identified a pattern in the victim selection. The hospitals being targeted all have one thing in common. They're level 1 trauma centers that treat a high volume of military personnel and veterans. Someone specifically targeting veteran care, Maya said slowly. Exactly. And they're good at it. They've been operating for at least 3 years without being detected. Ramirez pulled out a tablet and showed Maya a series of graphs. Look at these mortality rates. Every facility on this list saw a spike in preventable deaths over the last 18 months, small enough that it didn't trigger immediate red flags, but consistent enough that it's clearly not random. Maya stared at the data, her stomach churning. She'd seen bad outcomes before. She'd worked in places where resources were stretched thin and people died despite everyone's best efforts. But this was different. This was deliberate. How many? She asked quietly. At least 47 confirmed, probably more. The number hit Maya like a physical blow. 47 people who'd trusted the system to protect them. 47 families who'd lost someone because of greed. What do you need from me? Maya asked. Right now? Your testimony? Long term? Ramirez closed the tablet. Colonel Harmon's task force is going to need a medical consultant, someone who can review patient files, identify irregularities, and help us build cases against everyone involved. That's a full-time job. Yes, it is. Ramirez studied her. I know you came here to get away from all this, but sometimes running doesn't work. Sometimes you have to turn around and fight. Maya didn't respond immediately. She'd spent 3 years building walls between herself and the military, between herself and the weight of all those memories. And now those walls were crumbling, and she didn't know if she had the strength to rebuild them. I'll think about it, she said finally. Ramirez nodded. That's all I can ask. Maya left the conference room and found herself standing in the hallway, unsure where to go next. The hospital felt different now, not like a place of healing, but like a crime scene. Every corridor, every room, every piece of equipment suddenly felt tainted. Alicia, the nurse who'd apologized earlier, approached hesitantly. Maya, are you okay? Yeah, Maya lied. Just tired. Maya, yeah. Everyone's talking about what you did, about Captain Voss. Alicia paused. Is it true? Did someone try to kill him? Maya didn't want to answer, but the exhaustion made it impossible to deflect. Yeah. Oh my God. Alicia's face went pale. I've been working here for 3 years. I never thought... She stopped, shaking her head. How did we not see it? Because they were careful, Maya said, and because people like Talbot are good at making themselves look legitimate. I feel like an idiot. Don't. They fooled everyone. Maya hesitated, then added, You should talk to the FBI. Tell them anything you noticed that seemed off, even small things. Alicia nodded slowly. Okay, I will. She walked away and Maya continued down the hallway toward the locker room. She needed to change, needed to get out of this building, needed to breathe air that didn't smell like disinfectant and conspiracy. But when she pushed open the locker room door, she found she wasn't alone. 3 nurses were standing by the sinks, their voices low and urgent, and they went silent the second they saw Maya. One of them, a woman named Jennifer, who'd worked at Riverside for over a decade, stepped forward. We need to talk to you. Maya tensed. About what? About what's happening here. Jennifer glanced at the other 2, who nodded encouragement. We've been noticing things for months. Equipment that disappears. Medications that run out faster than they should. But every time we reported it, Talbot shut us down. He threatened to fire me, one of the other nurses said. Told me I was being paranoid. Maya felt something click into place. How many of you knew something was wrong? At least a dozen, Jennifer said. Maybe more. But nobody wanted to be the one to make waves. You know how it is? Healthcare workers are expendable. Administrators have all the power. Not anymore, Maya said quietly. Jennifer's expression hardened. We want to help. With the investigation, with whatever they need. We're done staying quiet. Maya looked at the 3 of them, tired, angry, determined, and felt something shift inside her chest. She'd spent 3 years thinking she was alone, thinking that speaking up would only get her fired, or worse. But she wasn't alone. She'd never been alone. Talk to Special Agent Ramirez, Maya said. Tell her everything. Dates, times, specific incidents. The more documentation you have, the better. Will you be there? Jennifer asked. When we give our statements. Maya hesitated. Part of her wanted to say no. Wanted to walk away and let someone else carry this weight. But she couldn't. Yeah, she said. I'll be there. The nurses left, and Maya finally made it to her locker. She changed out of her scrubs slowly, her muscles protesting every movement. She'd been running on adrenaline for so long that the crash was hitting her all at once. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. You need to see this. Daniels. Attached was a link to a news article. Maya clicked it and felt her stomach drop. Hero nurse exposes massive fraud ring at Riverside General. The article had her name, her photo. Someone had pulled it from an old military database, and a detailed account of everything that had happened in the last 24 hours, written like she was some kind of vigilante who'd single-handedly taken down a criminal empire. Shit, Maya muttered. Her phone rang. Daniels. Did you see it? Daniels asked. Yeah. It's everywhere. Local news, national outlets, social media. You're trending on Twitter. Maya closed her eyes. I don't want this. I know. but it's happening anyway. Daniels paused. The good news is that it's putting pressure on the investigation. The FBI is getting flooded with tips from other hospitals. People are coming forward. And the bad news? The bad news is that whoever's running this network now knows exactly who you are and what you look like. Maya's hand tightened on the phone. You think they'll come after me? I think you need to be careful. Daniels' voice was serious. I'm assigning a protective detail just until we know more. I don't need... Yes, you do, and you're going to accept it, because I'm not giving you a choice. Maya wanted to argue, but she was too tired. Fine. Good. They'll meet you in the parking lot. Maya hung up and finished getting dressed. She grabbed her bag, double-checked that she had Ramirez's card, and headed for the exit. The parking lot was mostly empty by the time she stepped outside, the early morning sun just starting to break over the horizon. Two soldiers in civilian clothes were standing near her car, their posture relaxed but their eyes constantly scanning. And standing beside them, tail wagging, was Titan. Ma'am, one of the soldiers said, we're your security detail. Captain Daniels sent us. I figured, Maya said. She looked at Titan. What's he doing here? His handler said he won't leave you. The soldier shrugged. Apparently you made an impression. Maya reached down and scratched behind Titan's ears. The dog leaned into her hand, content. She was walking toward her car when she noticed something wrong. The front driver's side tire was flat. She stopped, frowning. It had been fine when she'd arrived for her shift yesterday. Then she saw the note tucked under the windshield wiper. Her stomach dropped. One of the soldiers moved forward immediately, his hand going to his concealed weapon. Don't touch it. But Maya had already pulled it free, her hands shaking slightly as she unfolded the paper. The message was short, typed, not handwritten. No signature. You should have stayed quiet. Titan growled low in his throat, his body going tense, his eyes scanning the parking lot. The second soldier was already on his radio. We have a potential threat, requesting immediate backup and a sweep of the area. Maya stood frozen, staring at the note, and realized with cold clarity that Ramirez had been right. This wasn't over. The people behind the fraud network knew who she was now, and they weren't going to just let her walk away. The soldier took the note from her carefully, sealing it in an evidence bag. We need to get you somewhere safe. My apartment is compromised if they know your car. He gestured toward a black SUV parked nearby. We're taking you to a secure location until we can assess the threat level. Maya's mind was racing. What about my things? We'll send a team to retrieve anything you need. The soldier's voice was firm but not unkind. Right now, your safety is the priority. She wanted to argue, wanted to tell them she could handle herself. But the truth was, she was exhausted, scared, and completely out of her depth. Okay, she said quietly. They escorted her to the SUV, Titan jumping into the back seat beside her without hesitation. As they pulled out of the parking lot, Maya looked back at Riverside General, the place she'd tried to disappear into, the place that had just torn her entire life apart. And she wondered if she'd ever be able to go back. The safe house was 40 minutes outside Phoenix, tucked into a development of identical beige houses where nobody paid attention to their neighbors. Maya sat in the back seat of the SUV watching the city disappear behind them. Titan's warm weight pressed against her leg, and tried not to think about the note. You should have stayed quiet. The words kept looping through her head like a broken record. The soldier driving, he'd introduced himself as Sergeant Hayes, pulled into a driveway and killed the engine. We'll do a sweep first, stay in the vehicle. Maya nodded, too exhausted to argue. Hayes and his partner cleared the house in under 3 minutes, their movements efficient and practiced. When they finally gave her the all clear, Maya climbed out of the SUV on legs that felt like they belonged to someone else. The house was generic. Beige walls, brown carpet, furniture that looked like it came from a bulk order catalog. There were bars on the windows and multiple locks on every door. Kitchen stocked, Hayes said. Bathrooms down the hall. There's a panic button in every room, red button on the wall. You hit that, we come running. Okay, Maya said. Try to get some sleep. You look like you need it. She wanted to tell him she was fine, but the lie wouldn't come. Instead, she just nodded and watched him leave. The second the door closed, the silence crashed down around her like a physical weight. She stood in the middle of the living room, suddenly aware of how quiet everything was. No hospital alarms, no overhead pages, no chaos, just silence. Titan nudged her hand with his nose, and she looked down at him. The dog's eyes were steady, calm, like he knew exactly what she needed, even when she didn't. "You're supposed to be with your unit," she said quietly. Titan huffed and sat down, clearly not going anywhere. Maya's phone buzzed. She pulled it out, half expecting another threat, but it was just a text from Daniels. "Ramirez wants to debrief you at 1400. I'll pick you up. Get some rest." Maya glanced at the clock on the wall. It was barely 8 in the morning. That gave her 6 hours. She dragged herself to the bedroom, kicked off her shoes, and collapsed onto the bed without bothering to change. Titan jumped up beside her, curling into a warm ball against her side. She was asleep in seconds. When she woke, the sun was higher in the sky and someone was knocking on the front door. Maya jolted upright, her heart hammering, her hand instinctively reaching for a weapon she didn't have. Titan was already at the door, ears forward, tail still. "Reese, it's Daniels!" a voice called through the door. Maya checked the peephole, saw Daniels standing on the porch with Hayes beside her, and unlocked the deadbolts. "You look better," Daniels said, stepping inside. "I feel like hell," Maya admitted. "Yeah, well, you're about to feel worse." Daniels pulled out a tablet and handed it to Maya. "The note on your car? We traced the paper. It's standard office stock. Same brand used at Riverside General." Maya's stomach dropped. "Someone at the hospital left it." "Yeah, and they had access to employee parking records to know which car was yours." Daniel's expression was grim. "We're running background checks on everyone with administrative access, but it's a long list." "How long?" 43 people. "Jesus." "Yeah." Daniels took the tablet back. "Ramirez wants to go over everything you remember from the last 6 months. Anyone who acted strange, anyone who asked too many questions, anyone who seemed overly interested in Talbot or Kirby." Maya's head was already starting to hurt. "That's half the hospital staff." "I know, but we need to narrow it down." Daniels hesitated. "There's something else. We got the full financial records from Talbot's accounts. He moved over $3 million in the last 18 months. The number hit Maya like a punch. $3 million? And that's just what we found. There's probably more hidden offshore. Daniel's jaw tightened. He wasn't just skimming, he was running a full operation. Maya thought about all the times equipment had failed, all the times she'd requested supplies that never came, all the patients who'd suffered because some administrator decided profit mattered more than lives. "I want to testify," she said. "You will. But first, we need to make sure you're safe." Daniels glanced at Hayes, who nodded. "Ready?" The drive to the federal building took 20 minutes. Ramirez was waiting in a conference room on the 3rd floor, surrounded by files and laptops, and at least 4 other agents Maya didn't recognize. "Ms. Reese," Ramirez said, standing, "thank you for coming." "Did I have a choice?" Maya asked. Ramirez smiled faintly. "Not really." She gestured to a chair. "Sit. This is going to take a while." For the next 3 hours, Maya walked them through everything. Every equipment failure she'd reported, every supply shortage, every conversation with Talbot or Kirby that had felt off, every time she'd been dismissed or ignored or told to stop making waves. The agents took notes, cross-referenced her statements with other testimonies, and slowly built a timeline that made Maya's stomach turn. The fraud had been going on for at least 4 years, maybe longer. Hundreds of patients had been affected. Dozens had died. And the people responsible had counted on everyone being too tired, too burned out, too afraid of losing their jobs to speak up. "You were the first person to push back hard enough that they noticed," Ramirez said when they finally took a break. "That's why they targeted you." "Lucky me," Maya muttered. "Actually, yeah." Ramirez leaned forward. "Because you didn't back down. And now we have enough evidence to take down the entire network." "How many people are we talking about?" "At Riverside? At least 6 confirmed. Across all the hospitals? We're looking at 30 to 40 individuals." Ramirez pulled up a chart on her laptop. Administrators, procurement officers, a few doctors who were in on it, even a couple of board members. Maya stared at the screen, trying to process the scale of it. How did they get away with it for so long? "Because they were smart," one of the other agents said. They spread the theft across multiple facilities, kept the individual amount small enough not to trigger audits, and made sure anyone who asked questions got shut down fast. Until you, Ramirez added. Maya didn't feel like a hero. She felt like someone who'd stumbled into a nightmare and couldn't find the exit. What happens now? She asked. Now we start making arrests. Ramirez closed her laptop. We've already got warrants for 8 people at Riverside. We're coordinating with local PD to execute them simultaneously so nobody has time to run. When? Tomorrow morning, 6 a.m. Ramirez looked at her seriously. I need you to stay in the safe house until it's done. Once the arrests go public, things are going to get messy. Maya nodded slowly. Okay. Daniels drove her back to the safe house in silence. Maya stared out the window, watching Phoenix roll past, and wondered if she'd ever be able to go back to normal after this. You did the right thing, Daniels said as they pulled into the driveway. Doesn't feel like it, Maya said. It never does. Daniels put the car in park. But 47 people died because of this fraud. You just made sure it stops. Maya got out of the car without responding. That night, she couldn't sleep. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling while Titan snored beside her, her mind racing through every conversation, every moment, every sign she'd missed. Her phone buzzed at 5:30 in the morning. Arrests are happening now. Ramirez Maya sat up, her heart pounding, and turned on the news. Every local channel was covering it. Federal agents swarming Riverside General, people being led out in handcuffs, reporters shouting questions that nobody answered. She watched Dr. Pressler walk out of the hospital flanked by 2 agents, his face pale, his hands cuffed behind his back. Her breath caught. Pressler? Her phone rang. Ramirez. Did you know? Maya asked immediately. We just confirmed it an hour ago, Ramirez said. Pressler was taking kickbacks from Kirby. Every time he wrote a prescription or ordered a procedure, he got a cut if it used supplies from Talbot's preferred vendors. Maya felt sick. How much? Over $400,000 in the last 2 years. She'd worked beside him for months. She'd trusted him to make the right calls, to put patients first, to do his job. And the whole time he'd been profiting from their suffering. There's more, Ramirez said. We found emails between Pressler and someone we haven't identified yet. They were discussing you specifically, planning ways to discredit you before you could cause problems. Maya's hands tightened on the phone. Who? We don't know. The emails were routed through an encrypted server. We're working on tracing it, but it's going to take time. So whoever left that note is still out there. Yeah, Ramirez said quietly. They are. Maya hung up and turned back to the TV. The news was showing old footage of her now. Military photos, hospital security footage, even a clip from a local story about veteran healthcare from 2 years ago where she'd been interviewed in the background. They were calling her a whistleblower, a hero, someone who'd risked everything to expose the truth. She wanted to throw the remote through the screen. The next few days passed in a blur. More arrests, more testimonies, more reporters camping outside the safe house until Hayes finally got fed up and called the local police to move them. Maya spent most of her time reading through case files Ramirez sent over, helping identify patterns, flagging discrepancies in patient records. It was tedious work, but it kept her mind occupied. On the 4th day, Daniels showed up with Colonel Harmon. We need to talk, Harmon said without preamble. Maya gestured them inside. Titan immediately went to Harmon, sniffing his hand, tail wagging. Good dog, Harmon said absently, then looked at Maya. The task force is moving forward. We're expanding the investigation to include military supply chains, and we want you to lead the medical review team. Maya blinked. Lead it? You're the most qualified person we have, Harmon said. You understand military protocols, civilian hospital operations, and you've already proven you can identify fraud patterns. I'm a nurse, not an investigator. You're a combat medic who spent 6 years saving lives in impossible conditions, Harmon corrected. And you just took down one of the largest medical fraud rings in the country. I'd say that qualifies you. Maya looked at Daniels, who nodded. He's right. You're the best person for this. What would it involve? Maya asked carefully. Reviewing patient files across 15 facilities, identifying irregularities, working with federal prosecutors to build cases, testifying when needed. Harmon paused. It's a 2-year commitment minimum. Full time. based out of D.C. Maya's chest tightened. That's not a job. That's my entire life. Yeah, Harmon said. It is. She wanted to say no, wanted to tell them to find someone else, but she kept thinking about those 47 names on Ramirez's list, those 47 people who died because nobody stopped the fraud in time. I need to think about it, she said finally. Fair enough. Harmon stood. But don't think too long. We need an answer by the end of the week. After they left, Maya sat on the couch with Titan's head in her lap and tried to figure out what she wanted. 3 years ago, she had left the military because she was burned out, because she couldn't carry the weight of all those lives anymore. Now she was being asked to carry even more. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number again. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. Reese? Lieutenant Reese, this is Captain Eric Voss. Maya sat up straighter. Captain, how are you feeling? How? Like I got hit by a truck, but alive. His voice was rough but steady. I heard about the arrests, about what you did. You saved my life twice, Voss interrupted. And then you burned down an entire corruption network to make sure it didn't happen to anyone else. That's not nothing. Maya didn't know what to say. I'm being transferred to Walter Reed for recovery, Voss continued. But before I go, I wanted to say thank you. And to tell you that if you ever need anything, and I mean anything, you call me. I will, Maya said quietly. Good. He paused. Also, Titan's handler officially requested that you be assigned as his new partner. Apparently the dog made his choice. Maya looked down at Titan, who was watching her with those steady brown eyes. He's not supposed to do that. Yeah, well, K9 units are stubborn like that. Voss's voice held a smile. Take care of yourself, Lieutenant. He hung up before she could respond. Maya sat there for a long time, staring at her phone, Titan's weight warm and solid against her legs. On the 5th day, Ramirez called with news. We traced the encrypted emails, she said without preamble. You're not going to like this. Who is it? Dr. Jennifer Morse, head of the hospital board. Maya's blood went cold. The board chair? Yeah, she's been running the entire operation. Talbot and Kirby reported directly to her. She handpicked every person involved, made sure they were protected, and eliminated anyone who got too close to the truth. That's why nobody ever listened when we reported problems, Maya said slowly. She made sure the complaints died at the board level. Exactly. Ramirez's voice was hard. And she's the one who ordered the hit on Voss. We found the messages. She paid Kirby $50,000 to make it look like a medical error. Maya felt rage building in her chest, hot and consuming. Where is she? We're bringing her in now, but Maya... Ramirez hesitated. She knows we're coming, and she knows you're the one who exposed her. Are you saying she's going to run? I'm saying be careful. We've got protection on you, but this woman is dangerous. She's been covering her tracks for years, and she's not going to go down quietly. The call ended, and Maya stood up, pacing the small living room. Titan followed her, his ears alert, sensing her tension. 20 minutes later, her phone rang again. Daniels. Turn on the news, Daniels said. Channel 5. Maya grabbed the remote and switched it on. The breaking news banner scrolled across the bottom of the screen. Hospital board chair arrested in massive fraud scandal. The footage showed Dr. Jennifer Morse being led out of her mansion in handcuffs, her face twisted with rage, shouting at the reporters crowding around her. This is a witch hunt, she screamed. That nurse is lying. She's trying to destroy this hospital because she couldn't handle the pressure. Maya watched, her hands clenched into fists, as Morse continued her tirade all the way to the federal vehicle. She's going to fight this, Daniels said over the phone. Her lawyers are already claiming you fabricated evidence. Let them try, Maya said. Her voice was cold, flat. We have the financial records. We have the emails. We have testimony from a dozen hospital staff. She can scream all she wants. It's not going to save her. Good, Daniels said. Because we need you to be ready. Her trial is going to be ugly, and they're going to come after you hard. I can handle it. I know you can. The next morning, Maya woke to find a different kind of news coverage. Not about the arrests, but about her. From combat medic to whistleblower, the Maya Reese story. The piece was detailed, thorough, and clearly written by someone who'd done their research. It talked about her service record, her tours overseas, the classified operations she'd been part of. It mentioned Kareem Ridge, though it didn't give specifics. And it talked about her 2 years at Riverside General, working night shifts, being dismissed and ignored, until the night everything changed. Her phone started ringing. Interview requests, speaking invitations, job offers. She ignored all of them. On the 7th day, Colonel Harmon showed up again. "Have you made a decision?" he asked. Maya looked at him, then at Daniels, then down at Titan sleeping at her feet. She thought about those 47 names. She thought about all the soldiers who'd trusted the system to take care of them when they came home broken. She thought about the quiet woman she'd tried to become, and the person she actually was underneath all that carefully constructed invisibility. "Yeah," she said, "I have." Harmon waited. "I'll do it," Maya said, "but on one condition." "What's that?" "I want full access to every file, every facility, every person involved, and I want the authority to bring in anyone I think is necessary." She met his eyes. "No more bureaucratic walls, no more being told to stay in my lane. If I'm doing this, I'm doing it right." Harmon smiled. "Done." 2 weeks later, Maya stood in front of Riverside General for the first time since the arrests. The hospital looked different now, smaller, somehow less intimidating. News vans were still parked outside, though fewer than before. She wasn't going inside. She was just here to pick up her things from her locker, officially resign, and close this chapter of her life. Alicia met her at the staff entrance, her face lighting up when she saw Maya. "You came back." "Just for a minute," Maya said. "Everyone's been asking about you, wanting to know if you're okay." Alicia hesitated. "Most of us feel terrible for not speaking up sooner, for letting them treat you the way they did." "You didn't know," Maya said. "We should have." Alicia's voice was firm. "We should have listened when you tried to tell us something was wrong." They walked to the locker room together. Maya cleaned out her locker quickly. There wasn't much. A spare pair of shoes, some protein bars, a photo of her old unit that she'd taped inside the door years ago. She was closing the locker when Dr. Pressler appeared in the doorway. He wasn't in handcuffs, he'd made bail, but he looked like he'd aged 10 years. His face was gaunt, his eyes red-rimmed. "I need to talk to you," he said. Alicia started to object, but Maya held up a hand. "It's fine." Alicia left reluctantly, and Maya turned to face Pressler. "I'm sorry," he said. His voice cracked on the words. "I'm so sorry." Maya didn't respond. "I told myself it was just business," Pressler continued, "that everyone did it, that the money didn't matter because I was still doing my job." He laughed bitterly. "I was lying to myself." "Yeah," Maya said. "You were. You tried to tell me about the equipment failures, about the supplies, and I shut you down because I knew if anyone looked too closely—" He stopped, shaking his head. "People died because of me." "Yes," Maya said simply. "They did." Pressler flinched like she'd hit him. "I don't expect you to forgive me." "Good, because I won't." He nodded slowly, then turned and walked away. Maya stood there for a moment, feeling nothing. No satisfaction, no vindication, just exhaustion. She left Riverside General for the last time and found Daniels waiting by the car. "How do you feel?" Daniels asked. "Tired," Maya said honestly. "Yeah." Daniels started the engine. "That's fair." They drove in silence for a while, the city passing by outside the windows. "When do you leave for D.C.?" Daniels asked eventually. "Monday." "That's fast." "Yeah, well," Maya looked out the window. "No reason to stay." Her phone buzzed. Ramirez. Morse just agreed to a plea deal. 20 years. Full cooperation in exchange for avoiding trial. It's over. Maya stared at the message, waiting to feel something. Relief, maybe. Victory. But all she felt was tired. "It's over," she said quietly. Daniels glanced at her. "Is it?" Maya thought about the task force, about the 15 hospitals still under investigation, about all the work still to be done. "No," she admitted. "Not really." "Good," Daniels said, "because we need people like you to make sure it ends right." That night, Maya sat in the safe house one last time, Titan curled up beside her, and opened her laptop. She'd been avoiding the news coverage, avoiding the articles, avoiding everything that had turned her into some kind of public figure. But tonight, she made herself read it. She read about the families who'd lost loved ones to the fraud, about the veterans who'd been denied proper care, about the hospital staff who'd been too afraid to speak up. And she read the comments, hundreds of them, thousands. People thanking her, people sharing their own stories of medical negligence, people saying they wished they'd been as brave as she was. She wasn't brave, she was just tired of watching people die because someone decided profit mattered more than lives. Her email dinged. Message from an address she didn't recognize. She almost deleted it, but something made her open it. Lieutenant Reese, you don't know me, but you saved my brother's life at Kareem Ridge. He was one of the 8 soldiers you pulled out that day. He made it home. He has a wife and 2 kids now. They exist because you didn't give up on him when everyone else already had. I saw what you did at that hospital, what you exposed, and I wanted you to know that there are people out here who see you, who know what you've done, who understand that heroes don't always look the way we expect them to. Thank you for being who you are. Sarah Mitchell. Maya read the email 3 times, her throat tight. Then she closed the laptop and sat in the dark, tightened, steady breathing the only sound in the room. On Monday morning, she loaded her few belongings into the trunk of a car Harmon had sent for her. Titan jumped into the back seat without being asked, and Maya climbed into the passenger seat. Ready? The driver asked. Maya looked back at the safe house, then at the Phoenix skyline visible in the distance. She thought about Riverside General, about Talbot and Kirby and Morse and Pressler, about all the people who dismissed her as too quiet, too invisible, too insignificant to matter. She thought about the note on her windshield. You should have stayed quiet. And she smiled. Yeah, she said. I'm ready. But as they pulled onto the highway, her phone buzzed one more time. Unknown number, no message, just a photo of her new apartment building in D.C., taken from across the street, this morning. Maya stared at the photo on her phone, her blood turning to ice water. The driver glanced over, noticed her expression, and immediately pulled to the shoulder of the highway. What's wrong? She held up the phone without speaking. He looked at the image, swore under his breath, and was already on his radio before Maya could process what was happening. We have a security breach. Subject received a surveillance photo of her D.C. residence, requesting immediate sweep of the location and enhanced security protocols. The response crackled back almost instantly. Copy that. Rerouting to alternate location. ETA 40 minutes. Maya's hands were shaking. She forced herself to breathe slowly, the way she'd been trained. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Don't panic. Panic gets people killed. Titan shifted in the back seat, sensing her distress, and pushed his head against her shoulder. Who knew about the D.C. apartment? The driver asked. Harmon, Ramirez, Daniels, maybe a handful of others. Maya's mind was racing. But it wasn't public information. Then someone on the inside is feeding information out. He accelerated back onto the highway, his eyes constantly checking the mirrors. Or they've got surveillance on someone close to you. Maya's phone rang. Ramirez. I just got the alert, Ramirez said before Maya could speak. Where are you? Headed to an alternate location. Driver says 40 minutes. Good. Don't go anywhere else. Don't contact anyone. We're treating this as an active threat. Ramirez paused. Maya, whoever sent that photo wanted you to know they could reach you. That's psychological warfare. Yeah, I got that, Maya said tightly. We're going to find them. But until we do, you're staying under protection. The alternate location turned out to be a federal facility in Northern Virginia, the kind of place that didn't appear on any public maps. High walls, guard towers, checkpoints every 100 feet. Maya spent the rest of Monday in a debriefing room answering the same questions over and over. Who had she told about the D.C. apartment? Who had access to her travel plans? Had anyone been following her? Had she noticed anything unusual? By Tuesday morning, she was exhausted and furious and ready to walk out, security threat or not. That's when Colonel Harmon arrived with news. We found him, he said without preamble. Maya looked up from the cold coffee she'd been staring at for the last hour. Who? The person who sent the photo, Dr. Marcus Aldridge, former chief medical officer at Riverside General, resigned 6 years ago. supposedly to go into private practice. Maya frowned. I don't know that name. You wouldn't. He left before you started. Harmon pulled out a file and dropped it on the table. But he's been connected to this fraud network from the beginning. He set up the initial partnerships with the corrupt vendors. He recruited Morse. And when things got too hot, he stepped back and let everyone else take the fall. Where is he now? That's the problem. We don't know. Harmon's expression was grim. He disappeared 3 days ago, right after Morse agreed to cooperate. We think he's planning to run, but first he wanted to tie up loose ends. I'm a loose end, Maya said quietly. Yeah, you are. She looked at the file, then back at Harmon. So what's the plan? I sit here and wait for him to make a move? The plan is you stay safe while we track him down. Harmon leaned forward. Maya, this guy is dangerous. He's ex-military, trained in counter-surveillance, and he has resources. If he wants you dead, he's going to try. Then let him try, Maya said. Her voice was hard, flat. Set a trap. Use me as bait. Absolutely not. Why? Because I'm too valuable? Because you need me for the task force? She stood up, her chair scraping against the floor. I'm not going to spend the next 6 months hiding while this guy picks off everyone who exposed him. If he wants me, let him come. Maya, I'm serious. She met his eyes. You want him caught? Then give me the tools to catch him. Harmon stared at her for a long moment, then sighed. You're just like your old CO said, stubborn as hell. Is that a yes? It's a maybe. I need to talk to Ramirez. He stood. But if we do this, and that's a big if, you follow our protocol exactly. No heroics, no going rogue. Deal, Maya said. 24 hours later, she was back in Phoenix, standing in the parking lot of Riverside General with a wire taped to her ribs and a team of federal agents positioned around the perimeter. The plan was simple. Aldridge had been monitoring news coverage obsessively, tracking every development in the case. Ramirez had leaked information to a friendly reporter that Maya was returning to Riverside to give a press conference about the investigation. If Aldridge took the bait, he'd show up. And they'd be waiting. Maya stood near her car, a different one this time provided by the FBI, and pretended to review notes on her phone. The parking lot was mostly empty. It was late, almost midnight, well past visiting hours. Anything? She murmured into the wire. Negative, came Ramirez's voice in her earpiece. Stay alert. Minutes crawled past. Maya's nerves were stretched tight, every sound making her flinch. The rustle of wind through the trees, the distant hum of traffic, the click of her own breathing. Then Titan, lying in the back seat of the car, lifted his head and growled. Maya's hand went to the concealed weapon at her hip, another FBI provision, and she scanned the parking lot. Nothing. Titan's reacting to something, she said quietly. Copy. Hold position. The dog's growl deepened, his eyes locked on something Maya couldn't see. Then she heard it. Footsteps. Measured and deliberate, coming from behind her. She turned slowly. A man stood 20 feet away, partially hidden in shadow. He was older, maybe late 50s, with gray hair and the kind of face that looked like it had been handsome once, but had hardened into something colder. Lieutenant Reese, he said. His voice was calm, almost conversational. I was hoping we'd get a chance to talk. Maya's hand stayed on her weapon. Dr. Aldridge, I assume. Guilty. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Though I prefer to think of myself as a businessman who got caught in an unfortunate situation. You murdered 47 people, Maya said flatly. I provided healthcare services and made a profit. There's a difference. He took a step closer. But I didn't come here to debate ethics. I came to give you a choice. I'm listening. Walk away. Stop cooperating with the investigation. Tell them you made mistakes, that you misunderstood what you saw. Another step. Do that, and you get to live. Maya laughed. It came out harsh, bitter. You think threatening me is going to work? I think you're smart enough to recognize when you're outmatched. Aldridge's expression hardened. I have connections you can't imagine. People in places you'll never reach. You exposed one network. Congratulations. But there are 5 more just like it, and they're all watching you now. Good, Maya said. Let them watch. Aldridge's eyes narrowed. You're making a mistake. No, you made the mistake. She took a step forward, closing the distance between them. You thought I'd be easy to intimidate because I'm just a nurse, just some quiet woman who wouldn't fight back. But you were wrong. Was I? His hand moved toward his jacket. Federal agents, hands where we can see them. The shout came from 3 directions at once. Agents swarmed from behind parked cars, from the hospital entrance, from positions Maya hadn't even known were occupied. Aldridge froze, his hand still halfway to his jacket. Don't, Ramirez warned, her weapon trained on him. Give me a reason. For a second, Maya thought he might pull whatever weapon he was reaching for and force them to shoot him. But then his shoulders sagged and he raised his hand slowly. Smart choice, Ramirez said. They cuffed him and read him his rights while Maya stood watching, her heart still hammering, adrenaline making her hands shake. Ramirez approached her once Aldridge was secured in a vehicle. You okay? Yeah, Maya said. I'm fine. You did good. We got a full confession on tape. Ramirez smiled grimly. He's going away for the rest of his life. Maya nodded, but she didn't feel victorious. She just felt tired. The media frenzy that followed was overwhelming. Every news outlet wanted an interview. Every talk show wanted her as a guest. Social media exploded with hashtags and trending topics. Maya ignored all of it. She spent the next 2 weeks in D.C. setting up the task force office, hiring staff, reviewing case files. The work was intense, demanding, but it was the kind of demanding that felt purposeful. She was making a difference. Real, measurable difference. Captain Voss was released from Walter Reed 3 weeks after the arrests. He showed up at Maya's office unannounced, walking with a cane, but looking stronger than he had in the hospital. You should have called ahead, Maya said, standing to greet him. I wanted to surprise you. He smiled, then gestured to the office. Nice setup. It's temporary. We're moving to a bigger space next month. Good. You're going to need it. Voss sat down carefully, wincing slightly. I heard about Aldridge, about what you did. I just stood there while the FBI did their job. You used yourself as bait to catch a killer, Voss corrected. That's not just standing there. Maya shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. Listen, Voss said, I came here to say thank you, again, and to ask if you needed any help with the task force. I'm being medically retired and I've got a lot of free time. Maya looked at him, surprised. You want to work here? I want to make sure what happened to me doesn't happen to anyone else. His expression was serious. I'm not a medic, but I know military logistics. I know how supply chains work. And I know what it's like to almost die because someone decided profit mattered more than my life. Okay, Maya said. You're hired. Voss blinked. Just like that? Just like that? She smiled faintly. But I'm warning you now, the hours are terrible and the pay is mediocre. Sounds perfect. 4 months after the arrests, Maya testified at Dr. Jennifer Morse's sentencing hearing. The courtroom was packed. Victims' families, reporters, hospital staff, federal agents. Morse sat at the defense table looking smaller than Maya remembered, her expensive suit replaced with a prison jumpsuit, her perfectly styled hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. When it was Maya's turn to speak, she walked to the front of the courtroom and looked directly at Morse. You told me once that nurses should learn when to stay silent, Maya said. Her voice was steady, clear. You said it during a staff meeting, after I questioned a budget cut that reduced our emergency supplies. Do you remember that? Morse didn't respond. I remember it, Maya continued, because it was the moment I realized you weren't just incompetent. You were dangerous. You saw patients as obstacles to profit. You saw healthcare workers as disposable. And you built an entire system designed to silence anyone who threatened that. She took a breath. 47 people died because you decided money mattered more than their lives. 47 families had to bury someone they loved because you cut corners and covered your tracks. And when people like me tried to stop you, you did everything you could to destroy us. Morse's lawyer started to object, but the judge waved him off. But here's what you didn't understand, Maya said. Quiet doesn't mean weak. Invisible doesn't mean powerless. And the people you dismissed as insignificant are the ones who brought you down. She turned to the judge. I don't have anything else to say. The judge sentenced Morse to 30 years without possibility of parole. Maya walked out of the courthouse and found Daniels waiting by the entrance. How do you feel? Daniels asked. Like I can breathe again, Maya admitted. 6 months after that, the task force had expanded to 23 people working across 8 states. They'd identified corruption at 12 additional hospitals, recovered over $18 million in stolen funds, and prevented countless deaths by fixing the supply chain vulnerabilities. Maya stood in the new office space, an entire floor of a federal building in downtown D.C., and looked at the wall of photos they'd put up. Victims who'd died because of the fraud, soldiers who'd been denied proper care, families who'd lost everything. "We're making a difference," Voss said, appearing beside her. "Yeah," Maya said. "We are. You should be proud." "I'm just doing the job." Voss smiled. "That's what makes you good at it." That evening, Maya got a call from Alicia, the nurse from Riverside General. "I'm applying to nursing school," Alicia said, "to become a nurse practitioner. I want to do more, help more people." "That's great," Maya said, genuinely pleased. "It's because of you," Alicia continued. "Watching what you did, standing up when everyone told you to be quiet, it made me realize I was playing it too safe. I was so worried about keeping my job that I forgot why I wanted to be a nurse in the first place." Maya's throat tightened. "You're going to be amazing." "I hope so." Alicia paused. "Thank you, Maya, for showing us what courage actually looks like." After she hung up, Maya sat in her apartment, a different one, secure and quiet, and thought about how much had changed in less than a year. She'd gone from being invisible to being unavoidable, from being dismissed to being respected, from barely surviving to actively fighting. Titan patted over and rested his head on her knee, and she scratched behind his ears absently. "We did okay, didn't we?" she murmured to the dog. Titan huffed in agreement. 8 months after everything started, Colonel Harmon called Maya into his office with news. "The Department of Defense is creating a permanent oversight division for military medical care," he said. "They want someone to run it, someone with field experience, investigative skills, and the kind of credibility that can't be bought." Maya stared at him. "You're offering me a promotion. I'm offering you a chance to build something that lasts." Harmon leaned back in his chair. "This division would have authority over every military hospital, every VA facility, every contract with civilian trauma centers. You'd have the power to implement real change." "That's a massive responsibility." "Yeah, it is," he smiled, "which is why you're the only person I trust to do it right." Maya thought about it for exactly 5 seconds. "I'll take it." "You don't want time to think it over?" "No," she said. "I've spent enough time thinking. It's time to act." 1 year after the night Captain Voss was wheeled into Riverside General, Maya stood on a stage at the National Press Club in Washington, D.C., speaking to a room full of healthcare administrators, military officials, and journalists. "We talk a lot about heroes in this country," she said into the microphone. "We put people on pedestals and act like they're somehow different from the rest of us, braver, stronger, more capable." She paused, scanning the crowd. "But the truth is, heroism isn't about being fearless. It's about being terrified and doing what needs to be done anyway. It's about speaking up when you know it might cost you everything. It's about refusing to be silent even when silence would be easier." She saw familiar faces in the audience. Daniels, Ramirez, Voss, Alicia, who'd flown in from Phoenix just to be here. "For 2 years I worked at a hospital where I was invisible," Maya continued. "I was dismissed, mocked, told I didn't matter, and I believed it for a while. I thought staying quiet was the same as staying safe." Her voice strengthened. "But staying quiet wasn't safe. It was complicit. And the moment I realized that, the moment I understood that my silence was enabling people to die, everything changed." She looked directly at the cameras. "If you're watching this and you're in a situation where you see something wrong, something corrupt, something that's hurting people, speak up. It's going to be hard. It's going to be scary. You might lose friends or jobs or feel like you're fighting a battle you can't win." She thought about that night in the ER when Titan had run straight to her, when her entire carefully constructed anonymity had shattered. "But here's what I learned. The people who try to silence you do it because they're afraid of what happens when you're heard. They want you to believe you're powerless, so you'll never realize how much power you actually have." Maya's hands gripped the podium. "You have a voice. Use it. You have strength. Show it. And when people tell you to stay quiet, to stay in your lane, to stop causing trouble, don't. Because the world changes when ordinary people refuse to accept that wrong is just the way things are. The room erupted in applause. Maya stepped back from the microphone and let herself feel it. Not the applause, but the weight of everything that had brought her here. The exhaustion, the fear, the moments when she'd wanted to quit, and the knowledge that she hadn't. That night, Maya sat in her apartment with Titan curled up beside her, reviewing the day's feedback. Her phone buzzed constantly. Messages of support, interview requests, emails from people sharing their own stories of speaking up against corruption. One message stood out. It was from a nurse named Rebecca, working at a small hospital in Montana. She'd noticed irregularities in supply orders, reported them to her supervisor, and been told to drop it. "I don't know what to do," Rebecca wrote. "I'm scared, but after hearing you speak today, I think I need to try harder. Can you help?" Maya stared at the message for a long moment, then started typing. "Yes, I can help. Tell me everything." Because that was the point, wasn't it? She hadn't gone through all this just to tell her own story. She'd gone through it so other people would know they weren't alone, so they'd have someone in their corner when they decided to fight back. 2 years after everything started, the Military Medical Oversight Division Maya led had investigated 43 facilities, recovered over $60 million in fraudulent funds, and prevented an estimated 200 preventable deaths through systemic reforms. Dr. Jennifer Morse died in prison from a stroke, never expressing remorse for what she'd done. Marcus Talbot was serving 23 years in federal prison, most of his assets seized to compensate victims' families. Dr. Lawrence Kirby had cooperated fully with prosecutors and received a reduced sentence of 8 years. Dr. Colin Pressler lost his medical license permanently and was serving 12 years for fraud and reckless endangerment. Dr. Marcus Aldridge was sentenced to life without parole for conspiracy to commit murder, fraud, and racketeering. And Maya Reese had become one of the most influential voices in healthcare reform, speaking at conferences, advising policymakers, and training the next generation of medical professionals to recognize corruption and have the courage to fight it. She still wasn't comfortable with the attention, still preferred working behind the scenes, but she'd learned that sometimes being visible wasn't about ego. It was about showing other people that standing up was possible. On a quiet Thursday afternoon, Maya received a package at her office. No return address, just her name and the building number. Inside was a medal, her old military commendation from Karim Ridge, the one she'd left behind when she resigned, and a note. "You earned this by saving soldiers under fire. You earned it again by saving them from a different kind of enemy. Wear it proudly. Colonel James Harmon." Maya stared at the medal for a long time, feeling the weight of it in her palm. She'd spent 3 years trying to forget who she'd been, trying to become someone smaller, quieter, easier to overlook. But the truth was, she'd never been small. She'd never been weak. She'd just been waiting for a reason to remember it. That evening, she met Voss and Daniels for dinner at a restaurant near the Capitol. They talked about work, about cases they were building, about the legislation currently moving through Congress that would strengthen oversight even further. "You're changing the system," Daniels said, raising her glass. "That's not easy." "Nothing worth doing is," Maya replied. Voss smiled. "I'll drink to that." As they clinked glasses, Maya looked around the table, at the people who'd stood beside her when everything fell apart, who'd believed in her when she'd struggled to believe in herself. She thought about the quiet nurse she'd been 2 years ago, the woman who'd kept her head down and tried to disappear. And she thought about who she was now, not a hero, not some perfect symbol of courage, just someone who'd been pushed too far and decided to push back, someone who'd learned that silence wasn't safety, it was surrender. Someone who'd discovered that the loudest voices in the room weren't always the strongest, but the people who kept going when everyone else gave up were unstoppable. The next morning, Maya walked into her office, Titan at her side, and found her team already hard at work on the next investigation. There was always another investigation, another hospital, another person who needed help. And Maya was ready for it, because the woman they'd tried to silence had found her voice, and she wasn't ever going to be quiet again.